places I'm gone. Well, I'm not going to lie for you, Jane said. I'll tell them exactly where you went and with who. With whom, Miranda corrected absently. And it won't be a problem. It'll be too late to find me, and my family knows I'm not an idiot. I'll be home around midnight, uncompromised, and no one need ever know. I just want a taste of freedom before I agree to marry one of those boring young men my brothers keep bringing home. Just a few stolen kisses while we watch the fireworks at midnight, and then I'll be safely back, and chances are no one will even notice that I went out. And what can they do to me if they find out? Beat me? You know you'll manage to charm your entire family out of being angry with you, Jane said. You'll even manage to charm me. Miranda pulled the hood over her boring brown hair and reached for her loo mask. That's because I'm adorable, she said pertly. Don't worry about me, love. I'll be back before you know it. Jane looked at her, worried. I wish you wouldn't go. I don't think Mr. St. John is trustworthy. We've already gone over that. I'll marry someone trustworthy. I'll be just a tiny bit wicked with someone beautiful beforehand. She leaned over and planted a kiss on Jane's cheek. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. And a moment later, she was gone. There were times, looking back on that night, when Lady Miranda Rohan couldn't believe how stupid she'd been, how gullible, how certain of her own invulnerability that she never considered the danger. Christopher St. John was charming, rakish, ever so slightly dissolute, and spending a few unchaperoned hours with him should have been perfectly safe. He'd been so handsome. Penniless, but that hadn't bothered her. She would inherit more than enough for both of them. And after 3 years on the marriage mart, there'd been no one she'd even considered as a possible husband until Christopher had glided into her life with his perfect face and tall, straight body, his white teeth and his charming smile. She'd laughed when he'd suggested she elope with him. It took her far too long to realize that the closed carriage he was using to return her home was taking too much time, and that while Christopher was dozing on the seat opposite her, the road was becoming rougher. And when she pushed up the blind, she saw only pitch-black night, not the lights of London. She hadn't succumbed to hysterics, though she'd been tempted. She'd been firm, angry, determined, and in the long run, helpless. He'd maintained his charm throughout her protests. He loved her, he adored her, he couldn't live without her, and yes, without her substantial fortune. I won't marry you, she'd said firmly. You can drag me in front of a minister at Gretna Green, and I'll still say no. First off, Miranda, darling, he'd said in the smooth voice she'd once found enchanting and now found irritating. Ministers don't have to do the marrying in Scotland. Anyone is qualified. Secondly, you'll say yes once you realize you have no other choice. I'll always have another choice. Not once you're ruined. Now stop fussing. You've been spoiled and willful, and now you're going to have to pay the price. We'll deal well enough together. I won't be a demanding husband. You won't be my husband at all, she'd said darkly. Now that's where you're wrong. She'd hoped he'd take her to an inn where she could throw herself at the mercy of the innkeeper. Instead, he'd brought her to a small cottage in the country, miles away from anyone else, with one sullen servant who'd ignored her. It had been her own fault, Miranda told herself, refusing to cry. And St. John was right about one thing. It was up to her to pay the price. Just not the price he thought he'd guaranteed. Because compromising her was not enough. St. John was a man who cared about the details, and the second night he took her virginity to ensure his financial future. It hadn't been rape. Miranda had curled up, holding her stomach afterward. She'd neither screamed nor fought, and when it